Haroldson.
Here.
Representative Pendergraft.
Here.
Representative Sherwood.
Here.
Representative Smith.
Here.
Chairman Bear.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. I'm going to start this meeting with an announcement. We are going to lay back Senate File 196. The sponsor of the bill has asked that we lay that back. Is it 197? No, we're keeping 197. We're doing that today. 196 is being laid back to Wednesday of next week. Ms. Childress, what is that date?
Wednesday would be the 26th.
Okay, so Wednesday, the 26th, we will hear Senate File 196. We have, Mr. Jones is online. Just wanted him to know that, but also for the public record, the sponsor of the bill has asked that we lay that back. So it's being laid back till Wednesday. And now we will begin addressing Senate File 197. We have Representative Alaman willing and able to present 197.
You're still not coming? You're still told me this morning he's going to be here.
He is not here.
You always like
Yes, sir. And I think you might get some help from Representative Harshman. I know he'd like to discuss the bill as well. So if you would not mind, Representative Alaman, to please, sit out in front of us and share the bill with us as best you can. Representative Alaman, I know this is not your area of expertise, but we do appreciate your willingness to share this bill with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is House Bill 197. And it's it's a lot of pages, but it's actually pretty simple. And what the bill does, to really explain it, I'm going to have to read a lot of it, which I really don't like people doing, but it's going to have to get through it. It's an act relating to the investment of state funds, creating the Wyoming Generational Investment Account, specifying the investment of funds in the account, specifying the disposition of investment earnings, providing for the account and administration of the account, requiring transfers of funds, reports, making conforming amendments, and effective date. Then down on line 13, 94227, Wyoming Generational Investment Account. And there's created the Wyoming Generational Investment Account. The account shall consist of all funds transferred or appropriated to the account by law. All monies deposited or transferred into the account are invalid and constitute a permanent or perpetual trust fund, subject to the provisions for the withdrawal of funds provided by this section. The state treasurer shall invest all funds in the Wyoming Generational Investment Account in accordance with Wyoming Statute 94715A and C through E, and 94716, Wyoming Statute 94716E, shall not apply to the account. The state treasurer or the treasurer's designee, which shall be registered under the Federal Investment Advisors Act of 1940 as amended, and if required to be registered by the terms of that act, may invest the unobligated, unencumbered balance of the account in equities, including stocks or corporations. The account shall be invested so that the overall risk profile of the account's investments shall not materially exceed the risk profile of a reference portfolio. that consists of 85% private equity and 15% private credit investments. We turn over to page 3. It goes on to say, board shall seek to preserve the balance of the account in a manner that strives for the highest possible risk-adjusted total net return consistent with an appropriate level of safety and liquidity, giving consideration to the account's potential extended investment period and the extended period during which monies in the account may be ineligible for withdrawal. And then we go on to say that beginning July 1st of 2026. Yes, sir.
So this next section, if you could just read off for us, rather than all of the verbiage, just read off the different levels of investment that would be invested based on the LISRA balance. Just give those numbers to us, the different categories.
If there is $170 million in the LISRA account, 1.7 billion.
Yeah, we here in appropriations have to adjust for those commas.
Okay, yeah, we're supposed to, but it don't always happen. But if we have $1.75 billion, the treasurer has the right to take $100 million and invest it. And then if our legislative stabilization reserve account was only $1.25 billion, then we would only be able to take $50 million out of it for investment. And if it fell to zero, if it fell to $1 billion in the legislative stabilization reserve, we would not be able to take anything in that case. Transfers shall be made under this subsection if funds are available from the legislative stabilization reserve account. On July 1st of the fiscal year, 30 years after the first deposit, 37.5% of the income generated from this account would go into the general fund. And that is only investments, earnings, including interest, income, dividends, and realized capital gains. The earnings shall be distributed under the subsection 30 years after the initial contribution and 30 years following each of the respective. So every year after the 30 years, we would get 37.5% of the investment back into the general fund. Not later than November 1st of each year, the state treasurer shall report to the Joint Appropriations Committee what they've done. Investing monies of a fund or account which may be invested in stocks or corporation, 70% can go to global equities and 30% to domestic, and that's pretty much the treasurer's decision. And that's pretty much the bill.
All right, thank you. Representative Element, is there any questions for the bringer? Seeing none, I know you have an amendment here, and I want to discuss this amendment, but before we do, I just want to start taking some public comment, just so we can hear from them, and then we'll get to this amendment if there's anybody that wants to, in the public, that wants to speak to that. So I'm going to start with Representative Harshman. We appreciate you being here at Appropriations. We'd like to hear your thoughts on this bill, and have you had an opportunity to look at the amendment? Oh, okay, we'll just discuss the bill as it was just presented to you, and if you want to discuss the amendment later, you're welcome to do that.
Mr. Chairman, members, just public comment on the bill. This, and I don't know where, there's a sponsor right there, I guess. So Actually, if you want me to pause and let the
That'd be
sponsor?
fine.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that-
Thank you,
they
Representative
were just
Harshman. Appreciate your accommodating the good senator. Senator Driscoll, welcome to House Appropriations.
Mr. Chairman, my apologies, we just
No
got out.
apology necessary. We're just, we're all busy right now, and Representative Alman has read through the bill, and we haven't touched your amendment yet, but if there's anything you'd like to add just as a discussion on the bill, we'd appreciate it.
I'll just do a 30,000-foot view and kind of where I stand on it, and we'll talk on the amendment just a tiny bit.
Please.
Committee, Mr. Chairman, I think this is probably the most significant bill of the session and maybe of the decade, if you really look at it. So if you look back and you look at the PMTF and what it does for a permanent mineral trust fund, and it's providing about 30% of the general fund income at this point in time. The structure of this bill, and it depends what you do with amendments and how you do it, theoretically, the way it falls, and it's actually not theoretically if we can find out to fund it, will provide a very similar type thing down the road. And if we want independence from the federal government, overreach and where we're at, this is the means that provide us with the funding to be able to actually stand financially independent of the federal government, because it literally, after 35 years, is going to do that for you. It's not going to do it instantly. I'm sure as it went through, you know, it's all dependent on how we do it. The way the bill's structured now without an amendment, we've got a couple-year wait till we start on it. So we're actually not taking money away. We're all short of money this year. We're not asking for any money this year. So it does not put any in to start with, but it allows that framework. And then it also has sideboards on it. As you go into it, when you get to page 4, lines 1 to 23, it actually has the framework. This is prior to an amendment. So if the LISRA is at 1.7 billion or more, 100 million would go in. 1.5 to 1.7 billion, 75 million, and on down to zero. If we're at a billion or less, it's at zero. So my hope for you is that we pass this on. You're not spending any money to do it at this point in time. It gives us 2 years to take a look at, make sure that this is structured the way it should be. Very significant bill, and I ask you to really consider hard to pass the framework. So we've got it there. If you don't like it a year out, you don't have to fund it, and you actually can kill it. It gives us a 2-year break on it. So that's kind of where it stands, the way it lays right now. The amendment was brought to me, and I will tell you on my end, the amendment came from the Treasurer's Office. I support it as it goes, but if it matters whether the bill passes or not, I'd rather have the bill passed without the amendment, and I hate to get myself in trouble. I'm hoping the Treasurer's Office will come up here to help explain what it goes, but my honest belief is this. For all of you, for your grandkids and great-grandkids, this bill's probably the one that keeps them from having a state income tax or something else going down the road as times come. If you look backward, 2 years ago, we put 1.4 billion in the PMTF. If we'd had this framework in place and put that in there, that would have funded 15 years of this. We'd had a jump start and been halfway there already. And I represent to you, if times are bad, we won't put money in it. If times are good, it's a great spot to put the money. It really does affect, and I look at it, Mr. Chairman, I look particularly at you, but at all your committee. Mineral wealth has treated the state of Wyoming unbelievably well, and I happen to come from a ranch that has no minerals. We haven't had mine, but I've had a lot of friends that have had oil wells, all kinds of mineral income, and in one generation, they've spent all that money and they're broke again and they barely have a ranch. The ones that invested the money and put money in accounts for their kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids, those outfits are all still running pretty smooth and getting by good. I use that analogy. That's where I'm at, is I don't look at this mineral wealth that's coming in right now as belonging to me or to my neighbors. It belongs to the entire state of Wyoming and its future. And I think it's incumbent on us, knowing that we're going to run out of this mineral wealth to create an account for future generations that they can share in part of the wealth that we got. I realize that's kind of off the bill, it's where it's at, but that's the basis of where I stand on it. I ask you to put the framework in place for it. If you feel like you can fund it, and I'm going to let the deputy treasurer come visit on it. If you feel like you can fund it, I'm all for it. But at all, I implore you to let's get it in place and have some long conversations on, is this exactly how we want to do it? Because it gives us 2 years to change it. Thank you. I'd stand for questions.
I agree with you that no ranch runs better than those ranches with Lufkin bulls, right? So we're going to hear from Representative Harshman here in a moment, and I would say that for the committee, this is not far off from 1975 when the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund was established and those opportunities were created. So it is potentially a historical moment, but we're going to have that debate here real soon. So Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for being here. Looking back to 1975 and thinking about once the minerals are out of the ground, we get paid once, essentially. And I do have a great respect for what has been done in the past. Now we got one leg of the stool supporting us, and I see that. But my question to you, sir, is at what point is, excuse me, at what point is enough? How much of the government should be paid for automatically, and how much needs to be on the burden of those that receive the benefits?
Mr. Chairman, the burden has to come to whatever level the taxpayers can afford it, and that's up to them. That's what this body does, is policy decisions. And to me, this bill does not make it where they're absolved from any costs. I can tell you for my end, and I'll go back a little. Let's go back to 1975 and a guy named Stan Hathaway that was governor. There was less than $100 in the account when he came in. So anybody that thinks that he created the PMTF out of immense wealth, he did not. He actually was the guy, and it goes back to what you said. What they don't credit him with is he's who actually started the severance tax on minerals in Wyoming. We didn't have it up to that time. And he created wealth from the severance tax. And we've continued on that, and we can see as it goes down. So for my end, I've watched coal bonus money. I look at Representative Angelos, and her district paid for every school building for the last 20 years in the state of Wyoming with coal bonus money. Came right out of the ground in Campbell County. That money's gone. We haven't had any coal bonus money for a number of years. I don't anticipate any coming, even with the new administration. I don't anticipate new leases that are significant. We all know these bills that are coming, what it costs to build new schools. Once again, I look at Representative Bear and Angelos, we need a new high school in Campbell County. 160, 70, $80 million. Who should pay for that, and how should we do it, Representative Pendergraft? Because that's an interesting question. Someone needs to pay for it. If we can create a fund that actually does what it should, those schools will be paid in a similar fashion back to impacts that they have been in the past. Mineral Wealth will continue to pay for those new schools or similar type things. And that's really what I'm trying to do is, without the PMTF today, the state would be a very different place. That 30% means that it's 30% less tax for you and me, or 30% less government in some fashion. And some of us would like to think maybe we can get by with 30% less. It's a worthy debate. But the fact of the matter is, if we didn't have it right now, somebody'd be paying 30% more, notwithstanding cuts in government. So that's kind of the way I look at it. And it's, if you fund it out of times excess, it's not very painful. If you fund it when you're short, it's painful. And that's why it's structured the way it is we're really trying to make it where when we got good times, should we go build another building, or should we go spend some money on the state, or should we invest for the future? And my answer is, I'll take the non-new building maybe not remodel one, but let's look for the future generations. Thank you. That was a long answer, I'm sorry about that.
Follow up? Further questions for the bringer? Senator Driscoll, I have a question. On the amendment, there's an attachment from the treasurer that kind of gives us a rundown. And just want to be clear for the public and the committee that these numbers that lead to these large corpus and large funding opportunities for state funds, distributions, they're based on an annual $100 million deposit into the account, right? Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, yes, that's correct. The baseline of this entire deal is an assumption that 100 million gets put in every single year.
Okay. And does that continue on for 91 years, or is that, or is it just 30 years?
Mr. Chairman, if we go back to the bill, and I'm going to have to kind of wander a bit on you because I'm not good enough on the pages, but when we hit the first fiscal period on it, 37% goes and then it refunds itself from that point on. It literally cannot do it, but my hope would be, obviously, if the thing's working, you continue to fund it. That's, the example I was going to use with you, and I didn't. This is the exact same as buying your kid an IRA account when he's 10 years old. He's going to be a multimillionaire when he's 65. And that's really what we're doing here is very similar. So yes, it's based on 100 million. I would not anticipate 100 million every time. I gave the example. When I look back 2 years, I dearly wish this bill was sitting there because like I said, we'd have funded 15 years of it. You could have gone through 15 years of bad times and still got, actually it'd been better because the rule of 7, after 7 years, that 1.4 would have been 2.8 already. So, you know, we always make assumptions. The other assumptions in there, and I'll be upfront. Our treasurer's office and our investment staff has done a stellar job. Through some up and down times, they've managed to keep returns that are very close to double digits. We're assuming we're going to keep having returns like that. I will tell you as an investor, I would assume at some point in time, we're going to take some bumps and it's going to look pretty bad on a short term. I just left my phone downstairs. I can tell you, my very meager stock market account I had has taken about a 20% hit in a week. So I don't think these guys did it, but mine has. So yeah, it's like I said, there's assumptions in here when you deal with spreadsheets, and that's why you've not heard me make any promises on what the returns are. You know, you put the money in and you know it'll be for the better. I've never seen saved money turn into bad things. I have seen spent money turn into very bad things.
So just to be clear, it's 30 years at $100 million, and then this thing self-funds it from that point on. Okay, it's for the public. And I know we're going to get some, potentially some answers from the investment staff, but just from your perspective, borrowing out of the permanent mineral trust fund to fund this account, I think it looks to me like it's completely constitutional to do that. We've got an interest rate where we're going to pay back to the permanent mineral trust fund for those loans. Do you see there being issues with cash flow since we are getting 30% of our revenues from investments?
Mr. Chairman, committee, and I'm going to defer a little bit to the experts, but I will tell you from what I know, and I can get corrected if I'm wrong, we're running sustained yields at this point in time, 350 to 500 million, and no, it's not going to have major effects. Plus, it has that backfill end of it. I'm not good with the actuarial one, I'm going to be honest with you, and you start borrowing money to save money. Mentally, I'm having a little bit of a hard time getting around it. I'm going to be really honest with you. Like I said, I'd really like if Dawn could come up here. Could we do that and have her answer some
Yeah,
of these?
we'll do that in just a moment. I'm going to
Okay.
take just a moment and allow Representative Harshman. He's been very patient. I'd just like to hear his
I think
comment.
there's a lot better people to answer than me on some of this. So.
Yeah, I figured that was potentially the case. Any other questions for the bringer? Okay. Representative Harshman, unless you'd like to wait, I'm happy to let you ask your question or give us your comments now.
Mr. Chairman and members, appreciate you hearing the bill. First of all, I think this idea is really it's a cap finance interim topic. We did create a capital finance bill for the school generational account, looking at that 100 million one-time sale of the Kelly parcel, and that is it's not going to happen. I mean, there's other thoughts on what to do with that money. And so I filed House Bill 107, still in the speaker's drawer. I appreciate the senator filing Senate File 197. They're basically identical bills. I think the Hicks second reading amendment is pretty interesting, the way it was $100 million a year from the LSRA, and I'm intrigued by that. I think it's kind of interesting. We should probably talk about it. I think another way to look at it out of the LSRA would be to guarantee the LSRA, particularly if the SIPA goes away, guarantee a portion of the LSRA, and then we know that income is going to be there each year to do that. I pulled up on my, and this is really what this is about. You know, when Ben Franklin died, he left $5 million for the city of Philadelphia and $5 million for the city of New York, and he said they couldn't touch it for 200 years. And then, of course, they cashed that in and built subways and bridges with it. And but his famous quote, you know, we've all heard the Albert Einstein, you know, compound interest, most powerful force in the universe. But Franklin said it best: money makes money, and the money that money makes money. And I think Representative Pendergraft hit this whole debate on the head. And it is really about today's people versus tomorrow's people. And we struggle with that, and we should debate that. And you know, just the history of this, it was 1969, $89 in the general fund. World War II veteran, 50 missions over Europe, Governor Hathaway, adopted kid, Torrington, comes and asks for, and he campaigned for governor, I will not institute a severance tax. Then he changed, he flipped. Got booed at the Republican convention, I've read. He, 1% severance tax. And then, that was 1969. And then, a few years later, we were just meeting every other year for 40 days. And then I think 74 was the last year of that meeting every other year. So 75, the Constitution's changed. We have the general session in 75. And the legislature brings a proposal to raise the severance tax. And Hathaway said, no way, unless you take a portion of this and put it away for tomorrow's people, because these are one-time minerals. So that's how this whole thing, and I think, you know, I commented on the floor the other day, 68 legislatures. Who's number one? I don't know, you gotta think the 43rd, that was pretty far-reaching changing of the state. And so this idea then to take some of the money that we've made off of money and invest it, and really it's not a new concept, we're borrowing it from, you know, New Zealand, Australia, others who have created these, and use this power of compounding. But I go back to Representative Pendergraft and some of our discussions on the House floor. You see this in Alaska too, you know, and you're like, how much for today and how much for tomorrow and how much? And is it good to be trust fund babies? I don't know, you know, we've had that. I mean, we've all heard those anecdotes, you know, you read certain books about, you know, if you're entitled to a lot of stuff, does it make you better? I don't know. I think that's a thing. And so we struggle back and forth, and finding that right balance, I think, is the debate. I don't have the answer to it. I'm just trying to think about, though, if we want to try to keep our taxes low and keep this a third of our revenues, I think will be really important. And none of us can predict, you know, our population, all those things. We got a lot of big issues out there. But I think to take a small portion of money that we've made on our money and kind of supercharge that in whichever form we take. And I've got some handouts for you, and I'm just looking at this amendment comment as I learn more about it. But I think the concept is worth moving forward and having this debate with 62 of us on the floor. Be interesting. But I think Representative Pendergraft, that is the debate. That is the deal. Today's people versus tomorrow's people.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Could we get those handouts from you then? If you could just hand them to Representative Harrelson, we'll pass him down. Yeah, go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative, for being here. I do always appreciate the discussions, and I, just as a little aside, when this session is over, would you please send me a statement for the number of hours of history that I've received so I can get some credit?
Sorry to bore you.
It's not boring.
He just wants a degree.
Yeah, I'm only a couple credit hours short. I figure that maybe I should get credit for time spent here, but anyway, and I do thank you for your knowledge and being willing to share that. You mentioned Benjamin Franklin, was it? I have friends that are actually, they're kind of trust fund babies. Their grandfather made an unspeakable fortune. I don't even know how much it is, but hundreds of millions. And he put it away, and he said, out of the interest of that, he would pay for the college education of every one of his progeny, but nobody could ever touch or change the corpus until somebody made 10 million. And I always thought there was a certain wisdom in there, and his idea was that until you understand what it's worth, you're not going to treat it well. And you and I will fundamentally disagree on what portion of the state's revenue should be out of a trust fund. I'm very grateful for what we have. But at some point, you got to say, well, where's that level? So my question after all of that, a little of your own medicine, if you will, my question after all is, what portion do you think is appropriate as far as the amount of income to the state from a trust fund?
Representative Harshman, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, it's a good question, and my little brain is cramping a little bit on this, but if you look at our state today, you know, roughly 50% of our revenue is minerals, you know, off of ad valorem, severance, and FMRs, and some sales tax too, it's paid, 50%. And then this other 30% is legacy minerals. So the rest of us and out-of-staters who travel through, which is not an insignificant amount, pay the other 20%. And I guess and part of our issue as the smallest, least populated state and like the 10th or 11th largest state, we still got to have roads and water and services and all this stuff. And how does that look? I mean, how would Wyoming look if we didn't have this 30%? And our taxes would be a lot higher and our services would be less. There's no doubt. I think you'd be in that mix. So my answer to you is to at least keep it at that 30%. And maybe as it creeps up a little bit, as if minerals, I'm hopeful that minerals are going to keep rocking. I just think if we actually use science and not dogma, I think we will continue to find solutions to everything. All these things, it's all about, and that's the American way, in my opinion. So I think fossil fuels will continue to provide the world a great standard of living. So I'm hopeful, but if that slips, we still have to have customers. And if that slips, that this our investment in can somehow take over, because if you look at our demographics, we're getting smaller and we're getting older. So we're going to be more expensive per capita as we go through. And I think of my town in Midwest, you know, you look at a state next to us has 2 water systems, feeds the whole state. We got over 300. And my little town in Midwest, there used to be 500 of us paying water bills every month, about 125 now. And it's just all that stuff just makes it harder. And there's a lot to this. So the long answer to a short question, but I don't want to see that diminish below 30. And I think it's probably going to have to increase a little more as time goes on. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I follow up time. There's actually a third piece to this that is not addressed. So it's 30% of our general fund. Chairman Bear, you in particular, but the whole committee, the other piece of the puzzle is federal funding. When you look at our budget, everybody talks about what our budget is in Wyoming. And the truth is, the big part of the budget's federal money. And it comes with strings. And these guys make us jump through hoops and bend over backwards and do all kinds of strange things to get their money. And a lot of times it means we spend some of that general fund money to get to their money. I want that string cut. And I don't know any way to raise enough income to get that string cut other than something similar to this, to take a look at it, that we look at the feds and say, we're self-funded, we don't need your money. And we'll still take it on our terms. I'm one of the ones, I'm a little different than some. I'll continue to take their money, but I don't want their strings. So if we can fund this, we may continue with the 30 out of the PMTF, but this may allow us federal independence. And that's a whole different game. When you look at it from that standpoint, you've got a whole, Mr. Pendergraft or Representative, you got a whole different reason to look at why you would want this. Is your kids and grandkids will be beholden, and at some point in time, it's going to come tight on the federal government. We can all see where their spending's at. What will it do to the state? We talk about a fall off on mineral income. What happens today? It gets tight with the feds and their money dries up in an 18-month period. And we've got a needle in our arm using it, and we do right now. So this is our way to attain independence from that needle, is figure out how we do it. And it's always painful to save. I will tell you that, doesn't matter who you are. I can tell you, having raised a family, it's kids always need new shoes, and mama needs a new car, and you like to have a steak dinner once in a while. But if you want to retire well, you probably didn't have that steak dinner, and you went a few more years before you bought the car, and your kids didn't have the new shoes every year. So this is really what we're looking at. It hit home with me, Representative Pendergraft, as well, as how much and where. But Wyoming's 48th in tax burden, 48th. The only way we're going to maintain that is to figure out how to expand on our base for minerals and potentially have part of it come from savings. And what's the real benefit to send back a couple $100 a person in a tax refund right now versus doing a little bit of suffering so that they can stay at 48th a generation from now instead of being at 15th. And I don't have to look very far. You folks in Campbell County are close. You can look in South Dakota and know what you'd be paying if we were living a mere 30 miles away. My tax burden would be twice what it is.
All right. Any questions for either the bringer or Representative Hirschman? Seeing none, gentlemen, we appreciate your being here. Stick around if you can, Senator Driscoll, and Deputy Treasurer Williams, will you please come up? And I think we have, would you like both the treasurer and the chief investment officer online?
Yes, please, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
Can we bring both of them in at once, and we'll just be able to have a round robin conversation here? Ms. Childress? Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Driscoll, I just want to thank you for your comments. That was a perspective that I hadn't necessarily heard before. Thank you.
And are you capable of I didn't even ask if you're capable of getting them both on. That'd be great.
They are both on. Yes.
Okay. Do we get any video of there we go. There's the treasurer. All right. Deputy Treasurer Williams, we'll go ahead and start with you, since you're here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. I know the treasurer is anxious to speak and is sorry that he can't be here in person, but I'd like to really have you hear from him. This is the genesis is all his, and I know he's proud of it and would like to talk about it.
All right.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Treasurer Meyer, welcome to House Appropriations today.
Well, I'm glad you guys got this thing teed up today. It was a little surprise, but I tell you, we got a great team there that can answer any of the details. They got some good handouts, and I kind of want to give my overview and perspective. And I think I'll start with, the question about how much money is too much money in investments. And I'll kind of use the analysis now is that if you look at it and these numbers, because I don't have the tables in front of me, but the average, I guess, family in Wyoming will probably spend about $3,000 to $4,000 a year in taxes, all in, local and state, notwithstanding any federal taxes, of course. But they get anywhere, depending.
I think we're losing you, Mr. Treasurer.
You know, they got a couple of kids there. That's about
Mr. Treasurer, we don't have a good connection.
A few minerals and the coal, King Coal was really kind of paid our way. We know that and I think you guys have seen that handout that we've had from time to time where coal just basically dropped off, and so we're down about $500 or $600 million a year just in coal, another 100 million plus in coal lease bonuses. And really, kind of the genesis of this is to think about, okay, as we start losing our capacity in FMRs and severance tax and property tax through minerals, when those things are going away, how are you going to backfill them? And essentially, we're looking around for more efficient ways to make money on investments. The Permanent Mineral Trust Fund has kind of kept up with things while we still had energy revenue coming in, but it's starting to fall back. And you know, what are the alternatives? The ones that a lot of people will go to, well, let's raise sales taxes, and we've done in the past, let's raise fuel taxes so we can bridges that. But I get the look at this other thing we've had, you know.
Ms. Childress, are you capable of communicating with the treasurer?
That we're going to have in the future, which
Chairman,
is
I'll
concrete, whether it's bridges, whether it's dams, that sales tax, go ahead and build those things, or can we find an alternative? And I'll say that this is the alternative that I can see, and I think within the next 30 years, we'll kind of backfill the energy revenue that we've lost today, but we probably won't be to a point where we're backfilling the energy losses that we're going to have in the next 30 years. So we won't be all the way caught up. So I think what we're trying to do is say, yeah, that the part that should be coming from investments, from my perspective, it shouldn't exceed the part that we're losing on our energy. Because we've all had it really, really good with someone else paying our bills. And I don't want to get it to the point where you know, we're paying 100% of it, but I would like to be able to try to backfill where we're at now so we can at least keep our taxes at the same level or perhaps a little lower. And so I guess that goes directly to your question, Representative, that yeah, let's don't get overboard on this, but let's find a more efficient way to actually get returns on our money. And if we can do that and do it in a manner that it's at the highest return on the risk basis, like we've done in the past, then I think we can actually look forward to the same type of standard of living that we have today for the folks in the future. So that's kind of the goal. And there were some other questions, Mr. Chairman, and I don't know whether you want me to go to answer those, some of the things that were brought up, but there's a handout out there. I think you guys have that, and it has 2 graphs, and then it's got a couple of pages with tables on them. What would be?
Mr. Treasurer, we have a really bad connection, so we're getting about every third word.
Oh, darn. Okay. Well, I'm on the Wi-Fi here. Let me open the door and make sure that I'm in the office of the folks up here at Snow King on the mountain, but I'm pretty sure that I can, is this any better now?
I'm not sure. Are there any questions for the treasurer? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. Well, kind of, Mr.
Yeah.
Treasurer. You said that the PMTF was starting to fall back. And I'd just like you to elaborate a little bit about that.
Mr. Treasurer?
Well, yeah, because we're, with energy losses just in coal over 600 million. Essentially, if you're going to just replace that, we're at on our spending policies, we're around that 500 million. The PMTF has over the last 6 years has gone up about 533 million a year, and so but that increase in interest rate hasn't really kept up with the $600 million that we've lost over the last decade in coal alone. So, so we're actually kind of falling a little bit behind in trying to keep the revenue. If you're adding the mineral revenue and the investment revenue, that total is actually starting to fall behind what it was 10 years ago. That's where I'm saying is how it's kind of fell a little bit behind. And if I look at the amendment and read it in, what the amendment does really is that it allows us to catch up after severance taxes diminish going into the PMTF. It would allow us to catch up and essentially put in about $600 million a year plus into the PMTF corpus or the reserve funds of the PMTF or the Common School Public Lands Fund. So it doesn't go directly to offsetting needs for capital construction or different things like that. But what it does do is that it underpins the future of the PMTF to where it will actually outpace inflation. And the CIO, Patrick, can actually talk a little bit more in detail on that. So did you guys get at least 2 out of 3 words there?
Yes, we did. You're standing just right. Just keep your head tilted a little to the right. We'll be just
I won't
fine.
move.
Further questions for the treasurer? All right. Mr. Treasurer, thank you for being here. I do have one question I'd like to ask your office, and maybe either you or Patrick can answer this, but we have this amendment which calls for a loan with 7% interest being paid back at the term of the loan. And
Yes.
so I'd like to ask 2 questions. One is, what do you anticipate the effect being on revenues that we garner from our current permanent mineral trust fund for our spending policy? And then second, I'd like to know on this interest issue, what is the risk? What's the level of risk that we get to the end of the 30 years and we're not able to pay that 7% back?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you I'm up here at the WRS. We just went over our capital market assumptions, and they have a 20-year window that we looked at, and I can tell you in the 20-year window, what our assumptions are less than what they assume private credit and private equities will obtain in the 20-year window. And that's about as far as they were willing to go out and actually, say that. I can tell you also is that in our last 6 years, we've actually, in our privates, have returned over 12%. So running it at 10% is, a substantial reduction from what we're able to obtain. So we put a little room in there. I think CIO Fleming can opine on this a little bit more. But if you look at the chart on the back of that 4-page handout, that's headed Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, I can tell you how that was derived, and Sam and Don actually helped on this, or Sam did, and Don understands it if I cut out. But essentially, over the last 6 years, we've averaged $533 million growth a year in the PMTF, and that's from investment income and contributions by the severance tax. And that contributions by the severance tax continues to go down. And I guess we do have a chart that the CIO has, Patrick, that has the relationship to the inflation and when that we cross the line to where we're not keeping up with inflation in the PMTF. But essentially, the assumptions that we have in this chart is that rather than 533 a year, we went at 433. And you can see we continue to grow the value of the PMTF from 24 to 54 by about over $13 billion in that time period at 433 million a year. And we have those same assumptions in from 54 to 84. And then at the end of 84, the entire loan and principals have been paid off. And this is where we kind of supercharged the PMTF during those time periods from 55 to 84 by putting in the 22,836,000,000 loan repayment. And the reason that's so large is because we actually are compounding the 7% loan. And so the difference between that number and the 1.775 billion that we get at the end of that is what we continue to run the fund with and make distributions and have retained earnings for investment.
Okay.
Did you guys follow all of that? I mean, there are folks in the room there that understand it and can actually run it through if we didn't get the interpretation in there that you want to look at.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. CIO, please opine
Thank you,
here.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's Patrick Fleming, CIO for the Treasurer's Office. And a lot of things have been said, so I don't want to repeat them. But I do want to just comment on Senator Driscoll's comment about this is the most important bill that he's seen, and I would concur with that. This is, and back to Mr. Chairman, your comment of 1975. And the whole point of this is the thought of intergenerational equity, and that the money that we're taking out of the ground and spending today should be the same as for our kids and our grandkids. And being a third generation of Wyoming, I think that that's fair personally, but that's your decision. And so I am going to comment on that in a bit, because what Representative Pendergraft mentioned, instead of just kind of guessing how much is enough, I actually have a chart that I would like to pull up that the treasurer alluded to that actually quantifies that number with some other comments. So it's not that we're even having enough is enough. The problem is we don't even have enough to keep up. So what we're doing right now, over the next six years anyway, before it crosses, is we're spending more now than what our future generation will achieve. So that's the number one point. Number two is we all know mineral income is declining, i.e. coal is the big one. So that's not going to change. But also, as the treasurer mentioned, inflation proofing the portfolio, which is so important. So in today's dollars, which also ties into this intergenerational equity. So the way that what's happened lately is inflation has been extremely low over the last 20 years. It's averaged 2.6%. And there's many factors on this. COVID was a big thing, but also it was a period of, a much peaceful time. The amount of deaths and wars were extremely low. So it was really a perfect time to have low inflation. And it's unlikely, in my opinion, that with what's going on where, we're bringing more onshoring, there's much more global strife, that we don't see, some other issues that potentially will cause inflation to increase either from global trade or from any type of conflicts, which is just, all I'm saying is just history. It's just unlikely to stay that low. The other point that I want to make is what we're trying to do here is not take money away and raise new taxes. What we're trying to do is take existing funding and just be able to invest it in a better way. So for example, endowments do this all the time. They call it the endowment model. Over the last 10 years, the endowment model has averaged 9.1%, where our 10-year investment return is, 6.5. Last year we were 11 and almost 12%, and 5 years we're 8.5. So clearly we're moving up, but we're a long way off from that endowment model. And the reason being is we have to make distributions. We can't take advantage of the compounding that we talked about before, and also the illiquidity premium that endowments are able to do. So if we're able to do this, we can just make the money that we have now work in a more effective way than what we're hoping for. Now, this isn't a new concept. Other countries have been doing this for ages. New Zealand has, one of the better ones that started in 2003 because they realized their Social Security funding was going to go down, and so what they did is they had a fund that they will be able to start spending in 2035, and that fund has compounded at 10% annually. So that I think is a realistic number to say what is a target by enabling us to do this. So this isn't a pie in the sky deal. This is something that we feel that has historically been done. We feel that we can do this, and it would take care of many of those issues that we had talked about. So Mr. Chairman, if I may, could I pull up that chart to really answer Representative Pendergraft's comment about, what is, at what point is enough? And it's showing, it's not enough is enough. It's actually, we're spending money for our future generations already.
Yes, Mr. Fleming, please present that chart for us. And Ms. Childress, if we could go down to, I don't know, is it possible to go down to one screen on there so we can see as much of what he's sharing as possible? There we go. That's going to work. That's fine right there.
Mr. Chairman, can you see the scenario analysis?
We can.
So this is what the legislators in 1975 were talking about. And what they want to do is look at the projected income, which is the straight line. And what that is just taking in our income, historical income numbers, projected income numbers, which would incorporate our earnings, income, et cetera. Inflation, which they have at 2.5%, which I already said before, is, I think, somewhat questionable. And then the green line below is what our forecasted PMTF earnings would be considering intergenerational equity. And that's that gap right here between the 13.8 and the 12.2 is the loss that is anticipated between what our current structure is and what the future should be, because primarily of the energy drop. And also it's incorporating a 2.5% inflation. So I think that this is probably, this is best case, at best, would be something that we're looking at. So it's not enough is enough. It's just if possible, could we even get back to where we're supposed to be? That is the point I just want to get across. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I could stand for questions.
All right, questions for the CIO, Representative Smith. I got that right today, did you see that?
Thank you, good job. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, so if I understand you correctly, could this be solved if we just changed our spending policy instead of creating a different account?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, great question. And that is a benefit. So this is predicated on a 5% spend, and I know there was a bill at 4.5%. So that is going to help. That 0.5% will definitely help, but it will not change the math on it that it will change. And let's just say inflation goes from 2.5 to 3, that would erase any benefit that we have. So yes, absolutely it will help. And this would shift up slightly, but it would still cross over.
Good question there, Representative Smith. Appreciate you referring to our efforts in this committee. All right, any further questions for Mr. Fleming? Seeing none, Mr. Fleming, we appreciate your being here. Mr. Treasurer, we appreciate your being here as well. Ms. Williams, do you have anything to add?
Mr. Chairman, just one little thing. When Representative Harshman was talking about doing a backfill, we would respectfully request, or like a guarantee on the fund, if you did that, to not use the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund reserve account, because that does jeopardize our ability to effectuate the total rate of return that we're trying to do with our investments. So thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Hang on, Ms. Williams, hang on just a moment. Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just going to, and I think I fully understand, I just wanted to kind of run through what I was seeing, what I'm reading, and what I'm getting, and make sure that bounces back as right. So 100 million every year is our dream. I mean, we'd love to see that reality, right? 100 million a year goes into an individual account, and the next year another individual account. So they're coming to fruition every year thereafter. 37.5% comes out. It's reinvested, and basically we're just keep building, and it just keeps rolling and I guess you could say tipping and recreating its own accounts. And so really we have a 30-year run of spend, and then it's going to just continue to pay generation upon generation. I've got that right, correct?
Deputy Treasurer Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, you do, Representative.
Deputy Treasurer, I didn't see it as being a separate account each time. It's really going back into the same account, and it just continues to grow. Is that an accurate statement?
Mr. Chairman, it is. I took what Representative Harrelson was talking about as the being able to, that each $100,000 or $100 million would be invested in, it'll all be in the same pot, but we will definitely be tracking that individually so that we can return that interest on that 100 million at the end of the 30 years. So he's right, and you're both right.
Mr. Chairman, I understood that. I wasn't saying 30 different accounts. It was one account, but 30 slots, so to speak, in that account, in that accounting process.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for being here. We're glad that you struggle with commas as well. All right. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to comment on this bill? Mr. Secretary. Welcome to House Appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chuck Gray, the Wyoming Secretary of State. I'm one of the members on the State Loan and Investment Board, which helps to manage our state investments. So very interested in this topic. And I certainly appreciate the intent of this bill. It's very important that we invest our savings, invest a portion of what the state is intaking, especially with the challenges that we face on our core industries, but I think we are going to hurdle them with strong leadership. I want to be clear on that, and President Trump is providing that, and I think we are going to hurdle the challenges to our industries with that strong leadership. I have some concerns, though, with this approach, because, for one, I think creating a whole new account flies in the face of one of the slogans I've heard all 10 years I've been in Wyoming politics, is that there's too many coffee cans. And at times I've thought that maybe that slogan is a little bit outworn, but I certainly, it flies in the face of of some of the other actions of the legislature, especially in the last 3 years, in trying to reduce the number of coffee cans. If we're really trying to inflation-proof our savings, there are many ways to do it. One of the ways is to transfer funds into the permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund. Now, the downside is that those funds are inviolate. The way I read this bill, I'm not sure it's not inviolate, but I think the intent is that even in a cash crunch, that really you wouldn't be going into this account. And I think if this is the policy choice of the legislature, it wouldn't make sense to do that. But the way the legislature is inflation-proof the fund is to place more funds into the fund, which they did in '23. And I can think of at least one other instance where there was a huge transfer. And that took those funds off the table for addressing our core deficits, addressing things like property tax reform that need to be addressed. And I hear on the floor a lot out there that we're getting closer and closer to this $500 million level where really the LISRA can't backfill the day-to-day functions of Wyoming state government. Now, I know this, once you get below $1 billion, the transfer doesn't happen, and it's possible we're going to pretty quickly get to that level, and there might not be a transfer for a few years, I guess. But I really think that LISRA would have had $4 billion in it if not for some of the actions of the legislature over the past few years, maybe a little less than that. And this is another way that that's being drained. And I just get concerned that what that does is it gets closer and closer to a crisis where tax increases are going to be on the table, where not doing property tax reform is going to be on the table, as opposed to getting broad-based relief done, which is so important. And that concerns me. I think if the intent is to inflation-proof the fund, then let's look at either a sub-account within LISRA, which we did do, and it passed. I worked a lot on that in 2018 with Representative Harshman, and then unfortunately that was repealed by an amendment by Representative Zwanitzer on the floor, I believe in 2020 or 2019. You could do a sub-account within LISRA that does this, or you could place funds in the permanent fund. I will note that one of the predicates for placing all these distributions into the permanent fund that I've heard since I've been involved in Wyoming politics is, well, the permanent fund gets higher returns. Last year, 2024, the rainy day account had higher returns than the permanent fund. And that was said in the January meeting of the State Loan and Investment Board. And so they've worked a lot to increase our returns out of the rainy day account. And you could also look at it that this money had a higher return than the permanent fund when it was sitting in the rainy day account last year. And that's something that I've been very supportive that we really do invest those rainy day funds in a smart way. But I get really concerned about this approach of draining the rainy day fund. I think it's kind of because if that thing goes down, we are truly at a crisis. And all these draws, now certainly I'm supportive of property tax relief, that I think is, but all these draws on it, they all add up. And remember, this is supposed to be the backfill. When I think about the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account, it's supposed to be the backfill to the core deficits that we face. And the general fund is not a core deficit right now. Now, I know one of the predicates of this is that it might be in 30 years, but if we're getting to the point where the general fund is a core deficit, then that means everything is in core deficit. And so I just have some concerns on this. I have concern about the flow in 30 years going into the general fund. Why wouldn't we put it back into the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account to backfill the core deficits we have, which is what its function is, rather than the general fund, which can at times become like a slush fund where everything comes out of it that is a new function of government. So I appreciate the intent, but as a member of the State Loan and Investment Board, obviously I'm speaking just on my behalf. I just have concerns on this, and it's not the approach that I think, I have a lot of concerns on it. So thank you.
Questions for the Secretary? Seeing none, we appreciate your being here. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to testify on this bill?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Treasurer.
Yeah, and I welcome the contents, the comments of the Secretary of State. and its concerns about draining the LSRA. And essentially, the amendment that we have does not drain the LSRA. And it actually offers an opportunity for Slip Board to vote on every $100 million contribution to the generational fund. So it actually lends more oversight and control over the Senate amendment or the original bill, which essentially takes the money out of the LSRA. So the Secretary and I are in 100% agreement about the LSRA and making sure that that is available to the legislative process to do what it was intended, is that in times of shortfalls that or need, that there's in his words, a coffee can to take money out of. And I want to basically commend the Secretary and having the same realization that perhaps the LSRA is not the proper place to fund the generational fund. And what we are looking at, Mr. Chairman, and I'll go to the words of our Chief Investment Officer, is that we're simply looking at taking investment dollars and investing them in a more efficient and productive manner. And I'll give you a kind of the difference that would be, is that if you take these $3 billion over 30 years, that's dribbled into a generational fund, that'll give you the same returns of $26,670 million in one fund at 6% interest. And so the efficiencies of compounding by taking a little bit of money every year and then cashing in at the end of the 30 years and self-funding it from in the future is the most efficient use of the investment funds that we have today. And we do it in a manner that has a lot more oversight by each one of the Slip Board members, and in a manner that doesn't affect the LSRA. Now, to the extent as whether the proper distribution is to the general fund or to the LSRA, I leave it to the legislative process as a policy statement. It doesn't make any difference to me one way or the other, but the LSRA is the coffee can. And it has to be appropriated out, and the general fund is the general fund. It has to be appropriated out. So however you feel the best depository of the proceeds from the generational fund, either one is fine with our office. They both have to go through the appropriation process, and that's something I think that's extremely important, because that gets the oversight of the people that are represented by the people of Wyoming.
Mr. Treasurer, we always appreciate it when you and the Secretary are in agreement.
Yeah, it's a rare thing, but I appreciate it too.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Treasurer. With your CIO having that little chart up there, is there a spending policy that would, a good spending policy percentage instead of the 4.5 that we changed to, that would close that gap substantially?
Well,
Mr. Treasurer?
I guess opine on that and say that, you know, the spending policy is there, and the reserve account is there, and that 5 or 4.5 in that range is what we expect to do. It's more of a target, but with the reserve accounts, then it allows us to keep that target. And that target really is I think you have to look at it, Representative, as, you know, how much money do you want to try to get into the general fund from the PMTF? And that reserve account, or the spending policy rather, it's continuing to go up every year as far as the total dollars that go into that pot. But if you're going to outpace inflation, I think you can reduce that, and you can get those things to balance out. I think the days of having these huge years are going to be fewer and farther between when you can actually put in $1 billion or $2 billion into the funds, because frankly, we're having more and more capital construction situations, whether it's going to be bridges or dams or buildings or roads. Those things are going to continue to get more expensive, and that's going to be something where we're going to have to figure out how to fund them in the future. We just want to have the most efficient use of the time of the investment professionals and the money they actually invest in. 4.5%, I would say take baby steps on this, so we don't overshoot one way or the other. And hopefully if you have, two different funds generating money, if one fund isn't doing quite as well, maybe the fund that invests in a longer term with illiquidity premiums would kind of balance out the need to have money from the PMTF versus some other source like your back pocket in the taxes your constituents pay.
Okay.
But I didn't answer that exactly. I think the numbers say 3.5 to 3.7 on spending policy, but I would say 4.5, I think, is a reasonable spot to kind of work at it, because those numbers will change, and if you keep going back and forth on what the spending policy is, then you guys can't have a reliance on something you can budget with.
Okay, follow up? All right. Mr. Secretary, would you like to opine a little further?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for this opportunity. I really appreciate the treasurer's passion on this. I know he's very passionate about this, and that's great. I've had a lot of things I'm passionate about, and I know he wants to see it through. I will say, I'm not sure we're totally in agreement on the piece he spoke on, which is what I was trying to say was, and I don't think I did the best job explaining it. If we're really going to try to effectuate this, the intent of the bill, one way would be to either just do another distribution of the permanent fund, granted it's inviolate, if we're truly trying to inflation-proof the permanent fund, which we've done. Is $274 million in 2023 in the budget. I was just looking it up, $274 million, and that's without even the distributions to the investment funds for schools, which was in the 100 million range, above 100 million. And I'd be curious whether those projections on inflation-proofing the fund assume that $274 million distribution, its intent was to inflation-proof the fund. Not that it was, you're considering whether that in and of itself, that transfer is inflation-proof, because I think that analysis would be a little bit different that we saw from Mr. Fleming. I mean, that's why that distribution happened. Now, that took $275 million permanently off the table for whether it's investing through LISRA to backstop core deficits, whether it's to provide property tax relief, whether it's to provide needed services, took that off the table to inflation-proof the fund. And that's a decision the legislature made. I think there was a lot of wisdom in that, but some of this stuff has already happened. And the other way to inflation-proof the fund is, as Representative Smith said, is to lower the spending policy, which there's a bill out there that does that. But to create another coffee can and then, and I agree with Kurt, with the treasurer, you could certainly amend where the distribution goes, and but to create another coffee can that flows into the general fund, where there's going to be sort of this understood protection, I don't know if it makes sense. I think the ultimate way to effectuate that, if you really wanted to, is to create a sub-account within LISRA. And that's an amendment too, I guess. And LISRA's had mighty effective investment returns, more than the permanent fund, at least last year. And so that's another way to effectuate that. But I'm not sure we should be taking more money off the table other than looking at the spending policy, doing another flow into the permanent fund, or doing a sub-account within LISRA.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Chairman?
One more bite at the apple.
Thank you,
Treasurer.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think that, I would characterize the loan repayment to the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund as just an added benefit, not necessarily the reason to establish the generational fund. And I'll go back to the beginning. There's two things. We want to invest our money with the best efficiency, and this is the way to do it, is through compounding. And we want to make sure that we can replace the loss of revenue from our mineral resources and our natural resources in the state. So those are the two things that we want to do. And we can replace the revenue from mineral loss and essentially hold an equilibrium about the amount of actual money that is coming from non-tax resources with compounding in a generational fund. So it's just an added benefit of the compounding and repaying the loan that we can do that. If you would rather the money not be, we just pay the principal back and all the money go to the LISRA, that's a decision that I think that you guys can make as a policy. Essentially, just the consistency of the $100 million over that time period would allow us to actually do the main thrust of this, and that is to make sure that we have a way to have the most efficient ability to invest our capital and to pay back the loss of mineral revenue. We got to keep our eye on the ball on that. You guys can put that as a matter of policy wherever you want to put those returns. From our perspective, those are the two things we got to keep our eye on the ball, and that's balancing the losses that we've had with mineral income, and having the most efficient, safest way to get the highest returns. So those are the two things that this does. Where you guys put the money, that's a policy call. We just need to make it for you.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Any further comments in the room? Seeing none, we're going to go ahead and close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure? Move to pass by Harrelson, seconded by Angelos. All right. We'll work the bill. Page 1. Page 2. Representative Valman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have numerous amendments to put on the bill. Do you want me to be doing that as we go, or would you rather I did that at the end?
Well, if they're an all-encompassing throughout the bill, I'd rather us start right here at the beginning and get those worked in as we go. But is there more than just this one that we have in our hands?
Yes, this is the amendments. I think there's a total of 14 amendments, or 14 line changes.
It's all
Just one amendment.
It's all in one amendment.
Yeah,
It's
yes.
okay.
Is that?
Yeah, no, you don't need to describe this. We have it.
Cool.
We
Okay.
should have all read this in. And
Okay,
we can
thank you.
read it in. You don't need to read it in, but you do need to move the amendment and you need to describe the amendment.
Yes, sir, I would move the amendment to Senate File 197.
Okay, we all have this amendment. Is there a second? Okay, that amendment. Right, seconded by Angelos, okay. Representative Alman, please describe your amendment.
Okay, on page 1, line 5,
Representative Alman, I'm going to stop you now. I don't want you to read the amendment to us, just give us a general 30,000-foot explanation.
okay,
of the amendment.
what it's going to do, it turns this into a loan instead of just requiring transferring, it'll turn it into a loan. And then it will get rid of where it talks about if we have this much money in the reserve fund, then we will invest this much money. And it goes from investing 1 million down to 0. And that's the biggest thing in here, other than changing it from transfers to loans. And that's pretty much what this amendment's going to say.
Okay. Questions or comments on the amendment? Discussion on the amendment? Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So looking at it and just making sure I'm getting it correct, at the end of 30 years, there would be about 112 million returned on a 7% increase on 1.6 billion. Or I'm getting some head nods, okay? So really what we're doing is we're gonna be pulling, in essence, $3 billion out of Permanent Mineral Trust Fund over the course of 30 years and replacing that back with 112 million per year after that 30-year. And so personally, I struggle with this in the fact we're already talking about that account not performing to the level we want. So now we're pulling more out of it. So I don't know. I'm not sure that's the direction we want to go. I mean, personally, I do like the fact that if times aren't where we want them to be in the realm of financially, that there is a mechanism for holding back the investment. So I think in some ways I'm for that. So I'd be on and against this amendment.
Okay. Further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, do you guys have any questions about what this amendment does or how it works? Now's the time to get a good understanding of it. Okay, I think everybody's on the amendment. All right, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of Representative Alman's motion, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? No. Okay, that amendment fails. Okay, moving on. Any further motions on page 2? Moving on to page 3. Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to, on page 3, line 9 and line 10, strike 6 and let's put 7 in there. Let's just knock this out another year out there, just as we work on and kind of getting some of that spending policy under control that we heard from Representative Smith, and also gives us an opportunity to just really make sure we have our ducks in a row financially on this, and maybe make it a little more palatable for the body as they get their head wrapped around this generational fund.
Okay. So the motion is to change on line 9, page 3, from July 1st of 2026 to July 1st of 2027, and then on line 10, change until July 1st, 2056 to July 1st, 2057. Okay, everyone understands the amendment? Representative Pendergraft seconded. Any further discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of Harrelson's amendment, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. That carries. Further motions on page 6. Page 7. I'm sorry, I got it well ahead of myself. That was page 3. Sorry about that, everyone. We're back on page 4. Yeah. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could have the privilege to kind of just explain to our good representative that just showed up, kind of what we just got accomplished.
Absolutely.
So Representative Sherwood, thank you. Just wanted to let you know, we did choose not to accept the proposed amendment to pull it out of the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. So it is as it was before, with the one amendment that it has now got an enacting date of 2027 to 2057 instead of 26 to 56.
Okay. So, discussion on the bill. Representative Alaman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, this committee has saved enough to finance this for 2.5 years. This year, we saved that much. This year, we spent more money than this in fire and cheatgrass. This year, we spent almost this much money building a dam. I think we ought to look pretty hard at this. Thank you.
Okay. Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, it's really daunting to sit here and think that the vote that I'm about to make will have the impact that it would have, and I do not take that lightly. And I can see pros, I can see cons, and I guess, like I said, who am I to make this decision for the state? And I'm sure a lot of us feel that on a lot of issues down the road. So I do feel the gravity of that. And when I do, I always fall back on principles. And I'd just like to mention those principles at this time. The first one is, what's the purpose of government? Purpose of government, as I see it, is to protect individual liberty. And part of liberty, part of being free, is assuming responsibility. And I've said many times on the House floor and many times in other places, when you cede responsibility, you give up some liberty. And so I have that floating around in my head. There's also the constitutional principle that taxation, and by that I just mean government itself, should never be more than necessary to handle the essential functions. When is there too much government? And I look ahead and I think about trust fund babies and the idea of responsibility and liberty and all these things together. And I have to say that at this point, I'm going to be a no on this. But I want to qualify that by saying we need to do something, obviously, if we want to keep that third leg supporting the stool evenly. And so I would ask that we take this up in the interim and just look at maybe some ways that we can do better with the PMTF, whether it be this or whether it be something else. If we were to take it up, we've already edited it to push it back a year. I'm going to be a no at this time, but I want to know more. I want to look at the best way to do this without making government even more of a nanny state than it already is.
Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was just doing some quick scribble down math. If we're getting 50% from minerals, 30% from investment, and 20% from the actual tax base, when I say 50 for minerals, that we're talking taxes still, but mineral-based taxes. If we were to see, now obviously we've got the last 4 years has been a completely different change in that structure as, or the next 4 years hopefully will be a completely different change in the structure of what we're doing for our legacy industries. But truth be told, if there is a push that could eliminate our mineral wealth in this country and in the state, I just did a simple math. That's $9,482.76 per constituent in this state. That's man, woman, and child. And so I sit there and go, what does it look like if we say a household of 4 is looking at $40,000 in property tax extra? Now, obviously, I'm not saying that we don't need to cut some spending in this state. I fully believe that. I think that there is areas that we can slow the growth of government and be wise. I think that's an important thing. But the reality is the reason why Wyoming is financially where it sits is because of minerals. One of the things I'm all for using investments to secure the financial future for our taxpayers. I'm with you. We shouldn't be 100%, but I also will sit there and say, I went on that floor in about 5, 6, 7 different ways, tried to get a water tower last year, that if we would have had equities, wouldn't have had to be a conversation I had to make. There were people in our past that didn't do their job to be able to secure those things. That's my honest opinion. And so as I sit here, I believe that there is a responsibility for us to say, what are we going to do to make sure the next generation has the ability to do that? Now, I agree, taxes are a part of that. But I also know this, if we're not careful, we'll put a chokehold on people. And we don't have the numbers, nor do I think we probably want the numbers in this state to be able to pay the tax base. We've been blessed beyond all measure. And so I think that taking some of that blessing and being wise with it just makes sense. And so on and for.
Representative Angelos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be on and for, and I think even though we're trying to provide property tax relief, we're not going to go into our LISR and start handing out checks back to our people. And so I feel it's important that we safeguard their money that we have saved and safeguard it for the future. And so that's why I'm going to be a yes.
Okay, further discussion on the bill? All right, committee, I'd like to discuss it a little bit myself. We talked about mineral taxation. I want to remind the body that we could see a major increase in production, increasing supply of minerals, which would reduce the price of minerals. Much of our taxation is based on the price. So we could see a loss in revenue, even though we have a new administration that is very much pro-minerals. I think I'm holding out hope that we become an exporting nation and that Wyoming is very much a part of that export, therefore keeping both production and price up. But no guarantees there. And I want to remind this group, Representative Alman said it, we reduced the governor's recommendation in the JAC budget by a considerable amount. But I'll also remind you that we added that back in for tax relief at the local level. So there was a purpose behind JAC's work to get the budget down to a reasonable amount. It was for tax relief. When we did that, as the budget left JAC, we were borrowing, or not borrowing, but transferring $70 million from LISRA. The good representative that's here visiting with us today has pointed out several times just how much more we've spent out of LISRA. So we're currently spending out of savings. This committee rejected the treasurer's amendment to not take from LISRA for this effort and borrow from the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund, which I kind of had a little angst about that myself. Do we borrow to invest? I didn't get a real clear answer from anyone today that, the 7% interest keeps the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund flowing the cash that we spend, that 30%, throughout the coming years, while we're also taking $100 million away from that account to invest in this type of a program. But we rejected that. So now we're back to a position where we're borrowing from LISRA based on, or we're transferring from LISRA based on the balance of LISRA. That's where this bill sits right now. So much of your comments have been about, I want to see this happen. We're hopeful that now that we've moved it to 27, things will be different then. But I would say that this committee in the 69th legislature, if there's a nice cash flow, heck, it could happen next year. We could have good cash flows. And this body right here could be doing great work to continue controlling that growth that Representative Harrelson talked about, the growth of government. And we could institute this bill. I too agree with the vice chairman that, the good work of the Capital Finance Committee in looking at this and developing something for the school foundation program was good work. And I think it needs to continue. I'd love to see this be an interim study topic for this committee. I think last year's interim topic had to do with, and Representative Sherwood can correct me, but a lot of it had to do with gambling. And I think that that time would have been better spent looking into this subject. I think that the Secretary of State made a good point about our work to reduce the number of accounts. And if we're just going to put an account out there that's an empty account, hopeful and waiting for us to have good times where we can transfer into this investment, I think we're going against ourselves, against our own principles there. Do I hope that I'm a part of whatever legislature creates this account and gets this thing going? I absolutely do. I think the treasurer has brought an excellent idea, and I hope it's not just on the general fund side like this bill purports, but also on the school foundation side. We need to be able to fund our schools well into the future and not depend on, what the federal government gave us in properties to fund schools, but also the mineral wealth that we've had and put into schools. I think this is a great way for ensuring that we keep our constitutional commitment to our public schools in the future. So I'd love to see this type of an account on both sides of the ledger. But I think it's better to be studied and then the account created either at the time that we have the funds to do it or shortly before then. I don't think we're shortly before then now. It's going to depend on this body and the body that we present our budgets to as to how we're going to behave in restricting that growth in government in the future. So I'm going to be on and against the bill. Is there any further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Ms. Childress, will you please take the roll?
Roll call vote, Senate File 197 do pass as amended. Representative Allemand? Aye. Representative Angelos? Aye. Representative Haroldson? Aye. Representative Pendergraft?
No.
Representative Sherwood?
Aye.
Representative Smith?
No.
Chairman Bear?
No.
Mr. Chairman, 4 aye, 3 no.
All right, committee, good work. Senate File 197 do pass. And Senator Driscoll? Senator Driscoll, can I have some quiet here? Senator Driscoll. All right. I'll wait to hear from you on that. All right. If I don't hear otherwise, it'll be Representative Allemand at this point. Okay. All right. We are adjourned.